Howdy folks, welcome to Live at the Lazy T Ranch. I'm Ron Wilson, Total Lariat. Mighty glad to be with you. Today we are on location at Old Abilene Town in Abilene, Kansas, which is one of the most historic towns of the Old West. The story of how Abilene came to be a huge cow town has to do with the post-Civil War era, when, in fact, they're getting ready to ship cattle this afternoon. But that was the situation back in the 1860s. After the Civil War, there were longhorn cattle ranging free in Texas, and they were worth nothing because they were wild, they were plentiful, and the soldiers had been gone to the Civil War. There was nobody to look after the cattle. But in the cities back east, there was high demand for beef, and it was said that a longhorn in Texas could be worth $3 or $4 a head if you could catch him, but they might be worth 10 times that back east. And so a man named Joseph McCoy, a livestock trader from Illinois, had the idea of putting those together, traveled down the Kansas Pacific Railroad looking for a place where he could set up a shipping point along the railroad that would attract those longhorns from Texas. He went to Junction City, Kansas, and they turned him down. He went as far as Solomon, Kansas, out by Salina. They turned him down. The train made a water stop on its way back at a little village called Abilene. Joseph G. McCoy, this livestock trader, got off the train, looked around, and decided this was to be the place. And so he selected Abilene as his shipping point, and then sent agents to Texas to recruit cattlemen to bring those longhorns north. And ultimately, some 3 million head of longhorns would come here to Abilene, Kansas, and the era of the great cow town began. So I would make 2 points. Number one, that Abilene was the first of the great cow towns. There were other cattle movements. There have been cattle movements as long as there have been a cow and a boy with a stick. But the first of the great famous cow towns was really Abilene, Kansas. And secondly, that era is when the legend of the cowboy came to life. When those cowboys were moving those longhorns north, that was really the beginning of the legend of the cowboy. In the 1880s, there was a family named Eisenhower that came to Kansas and settled in the Abilene area. And here, Dwight D. Eisenhower grew up with his brothers. One of his brothers went to Kansas State University and eventually became president at K-State. Dwight went to West Point and, of course, go on to become a 5-star general and president of the United States. And in 1945, he was quoted as saying, "The proudest thing that I can claim is I am from Abilene." He was proud of his Kansas roots, his boyhood home. In my opinion, Dwight D. Eisenhower was a tremendous president. In 1961, after his presidency ended, Dwight came back to his hometown of Abilene, Kansas, and was greeted by throngs of admirers. And among those were me and my family. Now, I was just a little kid, and I have vague memories of this, but this is the way I remember it. That Dwight D. Eisenhower came to Abilene, and our family came over to pay our respects and greet this returning hero. And there were these huge throngs of people. There was so much excitement, so much buzz in the air. And as I remember, my dad picked me up, I was just a little kid, and set me on his shoulder so I could see over the crowd. There was all this excitement, all the buzz, and I could see up on the stage some old bald guy. What was all the excitement about? As a little kid, it didn't mean much to me, but I did have a chance to see Dwight D. Eisenhower. And when I passed, years later in 1968, our family came over and paid our respects standing on the street as the funeral procession brought Dwight D. Eisenhower home, where he is buried in the chapel here on the grounds of the Eisenhower Museum and Library and Boyhood Home. There was so much interest. So the steam engine's getting ready to load longhorn cattle. There was so much interest in Eisenhower and his boyhood home and the town of Abilene. Tourists were coming to Abilene. The folks in Abilene said, well, gee, what else could we have for tourists to do? they looked at their authentic cowtown history, and they built Old Abilene Town, which is a village, a recreation of an 1860s village. And this was a place where our family would come when I was a little kid. They had a saloon which served sarsaparilla. They had shops, a hotel, a stagecoach, a livery stable, a train station, and they had gunfights. They had gunfighters on the street. Now that was a whole lot more exciting than some old bald politician for a little boy. It was great fun. As I recall, there was a fun house at that time in Old Abilene Town where it had, a sliding floor and slanted walls and a waving mirror. We had so much fun as a kid in Old Abilene Town. Great memories of this place. Fact is, over the decades, times changed and the buildings deteriorated, and the place went downhill. But then a group of citizens got together and they reinvested and reinvigorated Old Abilene Town, I'm thrilled to say. And today Abilene Town is getting rebuilt. There is the train that gives exhibition train that gives rides. There are these buildings that have been redone here in Old Abilene Town. I'm standing next to the old jail. There's a brand new trail center which shares the history of the Chisholm Trail as well as the Smoky Hill Trail. And then that opened in the way station down here in 2021, just a few steps away. And in that same year, Old Abilene Town acquired a bull's head that had been in one of the original saloons. There was a place called the Bull's Head Saloon where the drovers used to gather at the end of the trail, and it belonged to Shotgun Ben Thompson. And that longhorn bull's head had been preserved, and it's sold at an auction in 2021. And the folks in Abilene, Kansas got together, raised the funds, and are bringing that longhorn back to the Bull's Head Saloon. And as we record this, I'll be performing cowboy poetry in the Bull's Head Pavilion tonight. So it is so much fun to see that Old Abilene Town has been saved, reinvigorated, and it celebrates the history of the Old West. So let me finish this segment of Live at the Lazy T Ranch with a poem that I wrote in honor of the great city of Abilene. Of all the cities in the West, is there a name so keen as the great cowtown which started it all, the town of Abilene? In 1867 is when it all began. A man named Joe McCoy came west with one exciting plan. He knew of longhorn cattle down in Texas ranging free and thought their beef could help to feed a growing society. He traveled down the railroad till the perfect spot was seen, a quiet little village we now know as Abilene. So Joel McCoy built stockyards here to draw those Texas cattle, recruiting herds to come this way and win the shipping battle. He had the Drover's Cottage built for cattlemen to stay, while Texas Street became a place where drunken drovers play. Marshal Tom Bear River Smith, who would enforce the law, as did Wild Bill Hickok, who was mighty quick on the draw. The drovers found a good place to commune in Shotgun Ben Thompson's Bull's Head Saloon. So among the key cowtowns, the town of Abilene was first, where the wild, wild west became the wildest and the worst. Down south there was a trading post where Wichita now stands, and Jesse Chisholm traded goods with southern Indian bands. The drovers followed Chisholm's tracks until they could prevail. Their route would be forever known as the historic Chisholm Trail. And the trailhead where those railroads and the cowboys would convene became famous worldwide as the cowtown, Abilene. Folks, thanks for joining us on Live at the Lazy T Ranch. Join us each Tuesday, 1 p.m. Like, comment, share. Until we see you again, happy trails and God bless.